Now, the AmaZulu King MisuZulu has called an urgent meeting with the Amakhosi on several issues, including the Ingonyama Trust. The Amakhosi oversee millions of hectares of tribal land in KZN. The meeting comes amid attempts by some members of the Zulu royal family to curtail the king's powers over the trust. Newzroom Afrika's Ntando Mnyandu is following the story. He joins us now from Ulundi. Ntando, good afternoon to you. What's the situation there?
Good afternoon to you, Stephen, and good afternoon to our viewers at home. Well, it's been a very long day with a meeting just concluding a short while ago where the King, His Majesty King MisuZulu addressed hundreds of Amakhosi from the province of KwaZulu-Natal on a very thorny issue of the Ingonyama Trust. There are issues, with the board, how the trust is managed, and the relationship that His Majesty enjoys with some of the senior officials in the Ingonyama Trust board. Now, you would know that the royal family has been making headlines recently with some of those happenings in the royal house, going to as far as the Pietermaritzburg High Court, where some members of the royal house are still not happy with King MisuZulu as the heir to the throne. They are also challenging, the authority that he has over a certain things in the royal house, such as the Ingonyama Trust. But let me bring in the Prime Minister to the Zulu Nation, Reverend Thulasizwe, to tell us and unpack the reason for the meeting today. Babu Thulasizwe, thank you very much for your time. The meeting today, what was it that His Majesty wanted to communicate to Amakhosi?
Well, His Majesty convened in Bezo today of Amakhosi, where hundreds and hundreds of Amakhosi from KwaZulu-Natal attended, where the king wanted to convey his unhappiness with the way that government is dealing in bad faith with the Zulu nation, particularly insofar as Ingonyama Trust is concerned, and the changes that are being made to Ingonyama Trust through the Department of Agriculture land reform, such as the power of Amakhosi to sign a document known as PTO, Permission to Occupy. That function is now going to be assigned to the department, and there's been no consultation whatsoever with Amakhosi. And the posture of members of the Ingonyama Trust Board, who were appointed by Minister Dideza, who refused to take instructions from His Majesty the King, as we know that the King is now the chairperson of Ingonyama Trust Board. So the King really sought the wisdom of Amakhosi to see what is the way forward. But of particular concern and of particular significance is the document signed in 1994, the Memorandum of Understanding, which was signed by President Mandela, Prince Buthelezi, and F.W. de Klerk, which paved the way for the recognition of the Zulu King and the Zulu Kingdom, including the issue of international mediation. His Majesty asked Amakhosi to go through that document so that we revisit to see what can be done to revive the points which are contained in that document.
It emerged that His Majesty is not happy with certain things that the Department of Agriculture and Land Reforms is doing, particularly on the issue of land, and the prospect of His Majesty approaching the International Court. Please bring us up to speed with regards to that.
No, His Majesty was just alluding to the options which are available to the Zulu people, including the international option. And he was basing that on the document of 1994, which I've referred to earlier, which is the Memorandum of Understanding, which was looking at the Zulu question on the eve of the 1994 elections. And 30 years later, we've come full circle because we are none the better off as the Zulu people, because the promises contained in that document were never honored. And the King is saying it's high time now that Ingonyama Trust and the land of the Zulus is governed by the Amakhosi themselves as opposed to government.
Tell us briefly about the issue of permissions to occupy previously, how were they administered, and what is the minister saying now going forward, and what does that, what effect does that have on the land that is administered by the Ingonyama Trust?
Currently, the permission to occupy certificates are signed by Amakhosi. Amakhosi convene traditional councils. They assess the request which is made by a person, and based on that, whether it's a commercial interest or a domestic interest, they then sign off the permission to occupy certificate, which is the core of Ingonyama Trust, which is the land tenure function. That is the function now which the department is taking away, and the king is saying not under his watch. He will not allow that to happen because he is the custodian of the land on behalf of the Zulu people.
Now let's talk about the issue of the leadership or the Ingonyama Trust Board. His Majesty made mention that he is not happy with certain individuals without naming. Why is His Majesty not happy?
Well, it's twofold. The members of Ingonyama Trust Board do not understand their role. They think that they are accountable to the minister. In fact, they are accountable to the Zulu people because this is the land of the Zulu people. And all instructions that have been given by the king as chairperson have been ignored by the board in general and by the CEO in particular, who fails to comply with instructions from His Majesty the King. That is why Amakhosi have now called upon the board to come and account to Amakhosi, to explain their behavior, so that Amakhosi can chart the way forward to see how do they deal with this situation.
Being frankly, will there be any actions taken against the CEO in particular?
Well, it's untenable that the CEO can survive in a situation where the majority of Amakhosi in the kingdom are siding with the king as the trustee of Ingonyama Trust and as chairperson of Ingonyama Trust. So if the CEO feels that he can, stand up against His Majesty the King, I think he has got it all wrong, and I do not see any way forward in how he will be able to continue with his obstinacy against the instructions of the king.
In closing, Prime Minister, in Pietermaritzburg, it emerged that there are some concerns with how money is used in the Ingonyama Trust. Would you kindly maybe put us up to speed as to how does Ingonyama Trust administers the land and handles finances of the trust?
Well, Ingonyama Trust is governed by an independent board, which is Ingonyama Trust Board, which is there to assist His Majesty as the chairperson. So therefore, all transactions are above board. All transactions happen in a transparent manner for the benefit of the Zulu people. So those who are saying there is something wrong with how Ingonyama Trust Board and Ingonyama Trust is handling its finances are enemies of the Zulu kingdom who want to see His Majesty fail.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, that is Thulasizwe Buthelezi, Reverend Thulasizwe Buthelezi, who's the Prime Minister to the Zulu nation, explaining to us what transpired in the meeting that was called by His Majesty King MisuZulu. With that, it's back to you for now.
Nandu, thanks very much indeed. Well, as always, a conversation of great national importance, the Ingonyama Trust and the management of the Ingonyama Trust. Wouldn't be surprised if there are more developments one way or another in that story.